Good evening, I'm Nima RAJAN, and this is Forum Daily for Monday, June 6th. Tonight, we begin with a concerning report looking into the growing number of Canadians struggling to put food on the table amid rising prices. Food Banks Canada surveyed 4,000 adults in a telephone poll 3 months ago, and they found that almost 25% reported eating less than they should because there wasn't enough money for food. It also found 1 in 5 Canadians reported going hungry at least once between March 2020 and March 2022. The CEO of Food Banks Canada says the majority of food banks are already stretched to their limit, and this summer is expected to be the toughest one yet. Mexico's president won't be attending the Summit of the Americas this week in Los Angeles because the U.S. did not invite all of the countries in the region. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is sending his foreign secretary instead. This comes after Washington confirmed Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua would not be invited. The U.S. says those governments didn't respect the region's democracy. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Canada has been among the strongest voices in criticizing human rights violations in Venezuela and Cuba. But he also acknowledged that Canada's relationship with Cuba is different from America's. China is defending its military pilots after Ottawa called them out for putting a Canadian patrol aircraft at risk. China says Canada will bear responsibility for any serious consequences from what it calls risky and provocative acts by Canadian aircraft. A Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson says its pilots acted properly and were protecting its sovereignty. The comments came following Ottawa's claims that China put the crew of a long-range patrol aircraft at risk. The Canadian plane was deployed to join other countries to help in watching for fuel transfers between ships at sea that could be helping North Korea evade UN sanctions over its missile and nuclear tests. Chinese ships are suspected of taking part in the transfers. Turning to London, Ontario now, where a prayer service was held in the Islamic cemetery this morning to remember the family killed in a hate-motivated attack 1 year ago. Relatives and friends read verses from the Quran and put flowers on the graves of 46-year-old Salman Afzal, his 44-year-old wife Madiha, their 15-year-old daughter Yamna, and their 74-year-old grandmother Talat. Yamna's friends have organized a vigil this evening. A former federal public servant went on trial this morning. This is more than 3 years after he was charged with breach of trust for allegedly leaking government secrets about a $700 million shipbuilding project. Matthew Matchett entered a plea of not guilty this morning at the start of a jury trial that is expected to last 4 weeks. He's accused of leaking secret cabinet documents about a contract between the federal government and Chantier Davy Shipyard in Quebec in November 2015. Meanwhile, hundreds of legal aid lawyers across Quebec are taking part in a 4-day strike. This to protest the Provincial Treasury Board refusing to maintain salary parity with Crown attorneys. The strike comes 2 weeks after 200 legal aid lawyers walked off the job for a half-day, demanding Quebec keep recognizing pay parity as it had for 30 years. Quebec has offered legal aid lawyers who've been working without a contract since late 2019 a 6% increase over 3 years. But Crown prosecutors saw salaries rise 10% over 4 years starting in 2020. Moving to Alberta now, where the provincial government is warning that the wildfire risk in the province's north is climbing. Fire advisories have been issued for the Slave Lake forest area and the high-level forest area. The province says these areas are experiencing warm, dry weather, which is expected to continue for the next several days. A blaze 30 kilometers west of Chipewyan Lakes was spotted on Saturday afternoon, which the province says was slowed by air tankers. However, it was still 270 hectares in size yesterday and was classified as out of control. No communities were under threat. On the West Coast, residents of Old Remo, New Remo, and Usk in northwestern British Columbia have been ordered to leave their homes due to the risk of flooding. The regional district of Kitimat-Stikine also declared a local state of emergency as a flood watch remains in place for Skeena and Bulkley rivers. On the other side of the country, a Prince Edward Island couple are brand new millionaires after winning the Maritime's latest Chase the Ace fundraiser. Annette Diewold and her husband, Russell McKenna, pulled the winning card from the remaining 7 in the deck on Saturday. The couple will walk away with more than $2.4 million, while several community organizations will also receive some big checks. After the break, we'll speak with Ms. Lynne Groulx of the Native Women's Association of Canada. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Victims' families and Indigenous advocates say the federal government has failed in its efforts to address violence against Indigenous women, girls, and gender-diverse people. And they say it failed to live up to the commitments it made last year in a national plan to address the issue. Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Mark Miller acknowledged their concerns at an event on Friday, marking the 1-year anniversary of the plan's release. Mr. Miller says the government has made some progress since it released its National Action Plan last year, but the Native Women's Association of Canada says there's been very little progress and not enough has been done to directly support survivors and families. With us today to discuss this is Ms. Lynne Groulx, the CEO of the NWAC. Ms. Groulx, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you very much for calling me in. It's such an important issue for us.
Now, has Canada made any progress toward ending violence against women, of Indigenous women and girls, as well as gender diverse people, as Minister Mark Miller says it has?
It's very little progress. So what we can say is that there's 231 calls for justice. And last year, the government only made a commitment to deal with approximately 30 of those. And when we analyzed it, they've actually come up with about 16 different actions that they've taken. So it's very, very little progress. And I can tell you that the priority is not there for the government of Canada. The minister himself, after 100 days in his office, gave a summary report, and he didn't even mention MMIWG, missing and murdered women. So we're very concerned about what's going on.
And following the report into this issue, what is the current state of violence against Indigenous women, girls, and gender diverse people in Canada?
Well, it's nothing less than a crisis, right? The conclusion of the National Inquiry report was a genocide. That's very serious, and there's been no improvements whatsoever. We actually think it's quite worse because there was a number of surveys that came out during COVID saying that the situation's getting worse. So it's of a very serious human rights issue in Canada at this moment.
And we know that NWAC was actually working with Ottawa initially on this National Action Plan, but in the end, it ended up walking away, saying this plan was fundamentally flawed and politically motivated. So can you unpack this statement for us and whether you still feel that way?
Well, we're saying that because when we looked at what the National Inquiry report asked the government to do, they said that the government needed to put a plan, and that plan needed to have details in it, actions, budgets, and who was responsible for it. And we didn't see any of that. And if you don't have a good roadmap and you don't have a good plan, then you're not going to be taking the right actions. And that's still true today. It's very blurry, and they're tinkering with it, and they're not getting to the issue.
So what sorts of changes does the federal government still need to enact to make more significant progress?
I think one very serious one, an immediate one, is there needs to be oversight over the process. And they need to start to look at doing programs and implementing programs that will help, including more policing, the oversight, and the transparency. We need transparency. If they are doing any actions, we don't see them. We don't know where to go to find out what's going on. So there needs to be some immediate action.
And actually, prior to the release of the National Action Plan, we know the NWAC made public its own fully costed plan called Our Calls, Our Action. So what kind of progress has the association made in this initiative?
We did the best we could to select 66 different initiatives, and we did our best this year to do fundraising, and we managed to complete 40 of the 66, and 18 we've made some progress on. We've opened 2 healing centers. We have set up a website where you can go in and put information about missing and murdered women. We put 12,000 Indigenous women through programmings and workshops. So we've been busy round the clock helping at the grassroots level to do the best we can to deal with this crisis.
All right, Ms. Groulx, about a minute left here, but the NWAC actually released its first annual report card on the government's National Action Plan. What sorts of results were in this report card?
Well, we ended up failing the government because, you can't just take actions, select 30 initiatives, and then do only 16 of them when there's 231 calls for justice. Not enough transparency by far, not enough actions, and, especially this oversight body and all the other actions that need to be done. So they really didn't score very well at all.
All right, Ms. Groulx, thank you again. Clearly, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, a lot of things to keep our eyes on, ma'am. Thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Stay with us after the break. We'll talk about rising food prices in Canada. We found new research from Food Banks Canada that says more Canadians are going hungry than before. We'll speak with Dr. Stuart Smythe, Agri-Food expert on rising food costs in Canada. So stay with us, Forum Daily. We'll be right back after a short break. We'll be right back. A new survey suggests a growing number of Canadians are struggling with the rising cost of food as prices for basics like pasta, bread, and meat continue to soar. The poll from Food Banks Canada indicates hunger and food insecurity are increasing across the country, with lower-income Canadians hit hardest by inflation. The survey, conducted by Main Street Research, found almost a quarter of Canadians reported eating less than they should because there wasn't enough money for food. This figure nearly doubled for those earning under $50,000 a year. It also found 1 in 5 Canadians reported going hungry at least once between March 2020 and March 2022. Well, joining us now to tell us more about this is Dr. Stuart Smythe, Associate Professor and Research Chair in Agri-Food Innovation at the University of Saskatchewan. Sir, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you, Nima. Pleasure to be here.
So what would you say are the main findings of this survey?
I think the most troubling thing is just how challenging it is for households that are fixed income households. So whether it's, low income or seniors, right, that are on fixed pensions, I think they're extremely challenged in providing a monthly amount of groceries that are affordable to them.
And what do we know so far about the communities and demographics that were hit hardest by inflation and the pandemic?
I think just about the report indicated that virtually every food bank across Canada. So I think this is a national issue, Nima, that it's not just, the Maritimes or BC or the Prairies or on Toronto, but it's simply across the country.
Definitely some concerning information there. Now, taking a look at the grocery stores, what kind of food products have been impacted by these rising prices most?
I think it's almost that it's tough to find an aisle in the grocery store where food prices haven't been impacted. We saw dairy prices rise 8.5% in February, and now the Dairy Marketing Board is warning Canadians that, look, we want to increase your milk and dairy product prices again this summer. Bread prices have gone up. Meat prices rose significantly, double digits throughout the fall of 21 and into this year. So it's just simply everywhere. We just don't seem to be able to get a break.
And are we expecting any further price increases at the grocery stores at all?
If fuel prices continue to go up, yes, I think we can continue to see food prices increase. Where I'm optimistic is in the fruits and vegetables as they start to be produced in Canada and farmers markets and those types of food options become available, that we may see some bit of a relief in being able to buy products there.
And I know a lot of Canadians might be wondering whether these rising prices are here to stay. What are your thoughts?
I think we can expect higher food prices overall. I know it doesn't seem like much of an advantage, but Canada, when we look at the percentage of our income that we spend on groceries, we're one of the lowest countries in the industrial world. So I don't know if that's much comfort to anybody, but it's a small relief. No, I don't think that we're going to see relief. Fuel prices are probably going to stay high for the next foreseeable number of months. Inflation is pretty stubborn where it's at 6 or 7%. So I'm hopeful that we may see some relief in the fall, but certainly not in the next few months.
Some tough info to hear. Now, you mentioned food banks a little earlier. So how have food banks across Canada been impacted so far?
Certainly, they're seeing an increase in demand, and there's been reports over the last few months where they've been making pleas in the media to get the public to come forth and donate staple goods or simply money, because they're having to compete with you and I to buy what products are available in grocery stores, and obviously their budgets are stretched just like the rest of us are, having to pay those higher prices to try and make sure that their shelves are stocked.
All right, Dr. Smythe, a quick 45 seconds left here, but what sort of advice do you have for Canadians that are maybe looking to save some money at the grocery stores?
Certainly coupons are a great way, but I suggest avoiding the niche market labels like non-GMO or organic. Those things all have a 30 to 50% price increase, and they're no safer or no more nutritious than all of the brand name items.
All right, Dr. Smythe, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
My pleasure.
Stay with us. Up next, we've got more news from around the world. Russia warns the West against sending longer-range rocket systems to Ukraine. Elon Musk threatens to walk away from his $44 billion deal to buy Twitter. And veterans mark the 78th anniversary of D-Day. We'll have these stories and more coming up after the break. So stay with us. We'll be back shortly here on Forum Daily News. Stay tuned. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned the West not to send longer-range rocket systems to Ukraine. The warning comes as Russian forces claim to have destroyed Western military supplies Sunday. This was in their first of such airstrikes on Ukraine's capital in more than a month. Moscow also accuses the West of closing off lines of communication, saying the West forced Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's plane to cancel a trip to Serbia for talks today. A Serbian paper reports that neighboring countries, Bulgaria, North Macedonia, and Montenegro, closed their airspace to Mr. Lavrov's plane. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson managed to survive a no-confidence vote today. He remains in office, but his position has been forever weakened by a number of scandals. The confidence vote was called after Conservative Party official Sir Graham Brady said he had received enough letters from Tory lawmakers demanding a vote on Mr. Johnson's leadership to trigger one. Less than 3 years ago, Mr. Johnson led the party to its biggest election victory in decades. Tragedy in southwestern Nigeria, where gunmen had attacked a church during Sunday Mass. They opened fire inside and outside, killing at least 50 people. Worshippers had just arrived for Pentecost Sunday Mass when gunfire erupted at the St. Francis Catholic Church in Ondo State. Bishop Jude Arogundade of the Ondo Diocese said there were gunmen inside the church, but also other gunmen outside who then killed churchgoers fleeing in terror. Stephen Omotayo, who lives near the church, rushed to the scene upon hearing the gunshots. He said the main entrance was said to have been locked, making it difficult for many to escape. Turning to southern Mexico now, where several thousand migrants have set out walking in the rain. They are tired of waiting to normalize their status in a region with little work and still far from their ultimate goal of reaching the United States. Their advocates said they wanted to call attention to their plight, timing it with this week's Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. The group of an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 migrants is the largest to attempt to leave southern Mexico this year. Mexican authorities have eventually broken up the others through a mix of force and offers to more quickly resolve their cases. Authorities in Bangladesh are struggling to determine the initial cause of a devastating fire at a container depot late Saturday night. It killed at least 41 people and injured more than 100 others. Experts are raising concern over the safety standard in the country's industrial sector. Unaware of chemical storage at the depot, a few hundred workers and dozens of firefighters were near the chemical containers as they attempted to extinguish the fire. Explosions in a container full of chemicals turned the fire into an inferno. Tropical storm Alex is heading for Bermuda after killing 3 people in Cuba and flooding streets in parts of Florida. As much as 50 millimeters of rain is expected, along with waves of up to 6 meters. Schools, businesses, and government offices are closed, and Bermuda's national security minister says emergency services are monitoring the storm. The company best known for developing the Taser says it's halting plans to develop a Taser-equipped drone. The decision by Axon comes as a majority of its ethics board resigned over the project. Axon CEO Rick Smythe says last week's announcement about the drone was designed to initiate a conversation about a potential solution after 19 children and 2 adults were shot and killed in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk is threatening to walk away from his $44 billion deal to buy Twitter. His lawyers made the threat in a letter that accuses the social media company of refusing to give him information about its spam bot accounts. The lawyers say Twitter has offered only to provide details about its testing methods, which they argue is tantamount to refusing Mr. Musk's data requests. Several dozen D-Day veterans, all of them in their 90s, stood on the beaches of Normandy, France. This to honor the comrades they lost during the invasion 78 years ago. 98-year-old American veteran Charles Shea says he has never forgotten the men who died there. Mr. Shea was a 19-year-old U.S. Army medic when he landed on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944. 359 Canadians were killed on D-Day and hundreds more were wounded. The D-Day ceremonies pay tribute to the nearly 160,000 troops from Britain, the U.S., Canada, and elsewhere who landed on French beaches on June 6, 1944, to restore freedom to Europe after Nazi occupation. All right, I'm Nima RAJAN, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for more news on demand, you could always visit our website or follow us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time.